That is one of my favorite songs. It's a good one. It is a good one. Turn with me to Ruth. It's that little book in there. The mic feels weird today. My head must have got bigger. Does anyone want to read for us today? Anyone? Yeah? Will you? Do you want a mic? No. Okay. How much do you want to read? You want to read the whole first chapter for us? Okay. Yeah. Cool. You didn't know what you signed up for, but you're gonna do great. It's a wonderful chapter, so just take your time. Yeah, yeah. I'll stop you there. You did great. Yeah, you did great. Can we give her a hand? That was hard. I'll stop you there because I want you to focus in on what Ruth said, right? Do not urge me to leave you or return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. Amen. Pray with me. Lord, I thank you so much for the reading of your word. That Scripture enlightens us, that we're able to tap into a narrative that goes far deeper than our own stories ever could. And Lord, I just ask that this morning that we're able to tap into this narrative, to take some nuggets from it. We might build up our own family with this same sort of love. I pray this in your Son's precious name. Amen. Amen. So, help me out here. What's significant about this chapter? When you hear it, when you read it, what draws you in? What's pointed out to you?
Selflessness.
The selflessness of Ruth. Yeah. What else? Family, the family aspect of it. The family that's dead. Yeah, the family aspect of Ruth, right? Yeah, the familial bond. But they're not really family, right? It's in-laws. It's just in-laws.
She's like my daughter.
Like. See, you said like. Exactly. She's like my daughter. You know, most of the time we'll like her, but other times I've just remembered that I like Troy. You know? Yeah, right. Scott? Sure. Yeah. Definitely a God-fearing woman, for sure. What else? How sad for this Naomi, right? How terrible. They go and they leave their homeland because it's in a famine. And they're like, if we stay in this homeland, we're not going to have anything to eat. We're going to die. So they go into this new land to try and find new life. And they go and find new life, right? Her 2 sons go and get married. How great. New life. And then they all die. How terrible. Can you imagine being a parent, being a mother, and experiencing something like that? Being a wife, experiencing something like that? Like, that's horrific. To go and escape tragedy only to find more tragedy surrounding you. And then you're left with your 2 daughters-in-laws, which, I mean, first off, daughters, but then you add the in-law, right? Not funny? So she has these 2 daughters-in-laws, but it's way more difficult than that in this cultural situation, right? Because in the culture that they're experiencing, Naomi would typically then wed these 2 daughters-in-law to her other sons, right? So that there's this sense of security that in that society was held only by men, right? Women were treated just barely above livestock and actually in many cases below livestock in their value. And so what they brought to the family was the fact that they were able to provide children, and that granted them the ability to have safekeeping, right? Security in some sense. If they were not secure, at that time, there was a lot of pillagers going around. And there was a lot of terrible things that happened to women, atrocious things. And so what you would experience as a woman without a husband, especially after puberty, was terrible. It was a terrible time to be a woman. How great it is to live in a time like we do today. And even though we may say, or you may hear commentary that there's still inequality in our world, at least we don't live in a world like this, where women have some sort of respectable, value about them as seen by all people, or at least most people. Because in this society, it was not the case. Naomi herself, being an elder woman, would probably be safer, and she could return to her home country where she would actually find some sanctuary in the family with once she lived. But for these two daughters-in-laws who were still young and apparently a childbearing age, and for them it would be especially treacherous because men are scary. Men house inside themselves something that's vile. In fact, what are our two Bible verses that we've been reading? We've been reading about sin, right? We've been memorizing about sin. And housed in men and women is this sin nature. And terrible things were allowed to happen at a time like this. There was a lot less laws. There was a lot less cops running around. There wasn't any sort of security unless you had a man in the house. It's a tough time to be Orpah and Ruth. And Naomi feels especially pained because she's lost her husband. She's lost her two sons. She feels that she's let down these two daughters-in-laws. And most importantly, she feels like God is against her. She's lost everything. There's nothing left. And so she's going to return back to her homeland where she may find some sort of sanctuary where she will call herself Mara, meaning bitter. She's spiteful, she's angry, she's lost, she's broken. And so she turns to Orpah and Ruth and says, "The road ahead of us is unknown. I have no security to give you. I have nothing to offer you anymore. My two sons were your two hopes of finding any sort of security in this world, and they're gone. I have no ability to produce for you any more kids, and even if I could, are you really going to wait till they're 18 for you to marry them?" You know what I mean? It's like 18 years from now. Actually 19, right? It's like 9 months. Isn't that how it works? You know? So, she says, "Go, return to your mother's house. Because if you return just like I am returning," Naomi's returning to her parents' house, so hopefully she'll find some sort of sanctuary. And she says, "You ought to return to your family's house in order that you also may find some sort of sanctuary as a widow, or else you may have no security in this life. No one to trust in, no one to lean into, nobody to fall back on. You'll be open, exposed to all the wrongdoers in the world. You'll have no home. You'll have no means of bringing in any economic stability. It's not like they just had job postings up and down the street. There's no way forward for Ruth and Orpah. And Naomi says, I can't provide a vision for you either. There's no hope here. There's no security. So return to your people." So Orpah says, "Adios. See you later." You know, she gets out of there. She says, "This is hopeless. This is a lost cause. Why would I return with Naomi to her family's house and just pray that they accept me as well? Because there's no hope for me. So why would I put myself into a hopeless cause of staying with this woman?" Ruth isn't like that though, right? It's not what we read from Ruth. Ruth gives this amazing response to Naomi asking her to leave. "Do not urge me to leave you or return from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." She looks right at hopelessness, at bleakness, at lostness, and she says, "That's where I'll choose to go." Why? Because you'll be there. She looks right at hopelessness, at death, at poverty, at hunger. She looks at all of it. And she doesn't say, "I'm just a glutton for punishment, that I enjoy the company of misery." She says, I'll go there because you'll be there. Because you'll be there. When we think about family, so for me, this is fitting that I get to announce that we're having another kid. It's fitting to me because it's one of those things where Olga and I have conversations and we're like, she's an accountant, so we're very much like mathematical about these sorts of things. We're watching the moon phases and, trying to decipher the stars, see if everything aligns, and also, balancing budgets and being like, well, Josiah eats this many dollars of food per day. If we have another kid, and, if he's going to turn, or this next kid's going to turn 18, will we be able to provide X amount of money so that they can, have a hope in a future kind of thing as far as that goes. Or time-wise, we break it down in the calendar and we're like, well, we're going to have to spend X amount of time with Josiah doing this, so how much time will we spend with the next kid? We just break everything down. Then we go to the demographics of Urbana and we say, if we add this one kid to the demographics of Urbana, how will it impact the local economy here, Had to make sure everything works out, okay? Had to make sure everything aligns.
Can't plan anything.
But in the midst of all the planning, in the midst of all the excitement behind that and the desire behind that, deep down, there's a fear that in spite of all the planning, that something could go wrong. That Olga comes to me one day and she says, guess what? It happened. And then you wait, right? Until Wednesday. And Wednesday you're just like anxiously waiting because you're like, is the heartbeat going to be there? You don't know. Because the reality is, a lot of times it's not. What do you do in that situation? I mean, you already made the plans. You already wrote everything out. You already decided everything. You already dreamed about it. You already got excited about it. You already thought through what you'd tell Josiah. What do you do if there's no heartbeat? The pain of that. Of the not knowing. Of the chaos. Of the loss. The hopelessness. What are you supposed to do? There's no CPR that saves something like that. There's no way to reverse something like that. It's over. It's lost. When I think about having a kid, it's a reminder of how out of control I really am. I like to have control. I like to be the person here, right? Orchestrating things, moving things, saying things, dreaming things, exploring things with each of you, saying, look at how great our God is. And, we could do things like Care Portal, or we could do things like Hope for Good, or we could have people in our church on Friday nights, and we could go make food for people, and we could build beds for people, and we could tell them about Jesus, about the hope and the future they have. And all of this just takes us like orchestrating, and it's exciting, and it's like, oh, we could do this, and we could set these plans, and we could do these things. But what you realize in situations like this is actually my plans don't mean a whole lot. A lot of things are out of my control. That people come and they go. People live, they die. Dreams grow and then they fail. It's a hard reality, isn't it? So, of course, you'd be anxious to look into something that appears so bleak and say, why would I want to be a part of that? And what you realize is the conversation around children today is that very conversation. If the world is so bleak, if life is so fragile, if things are so complex, why would I want to bring another life into this world? That's the very conversation that most people my age are having. That's why you see the birth rate dipping. That's why you see people not committing to marriages. Because if all marriages end in divorce, if all marriages seem so miserable, even the marriages that last, they don't talk to each other and the husband just turns his hearing aid off. If all marriages look like that, what's the point? Seems like work. And if I don't know if you've noticed from my generation, we don't like to do that either. There's a spirit of hopelessness in our world today. What you realize in talking to kids, like I just spent 2 days talking to kids, there's a sense of hopelessness. Those were Christian kids that feel hopeless, unsure of what the future might look like. And those are the kids that know Jesus Christ. If the kids that know Jesus Christ feel that way, what must the kids who have no support from Jesus Christ, who have no support from a local church, who have no support from two loving parents, if they have no support, what must they feel? The hopelessness, the lostness. Notice, a lot of times when we talk about hopelessness and lostness, we go straight to sin. Where was the sin in this? It doesn't give us any. It may just be that life is actually kind of hard. That life gives you a lot to handle. And the truth is, all of us come to the table with too much to handle. I can barely handle most of you most days, let's be real. And I know y'all can't handle me, so what do? Well, Orpah says goodbye. Orpah says, this is too much going on. This is too much hopelessness for my soul to carry. And so I'm going to go look for greener pastures. But Ruth gives us this really interesting look at what life in the midst of darkness might look like. Because she says, in spite of everything that's happening, all the chaos, all the busyness, all the mind-numbing things that are bouncing around, the fact that we've experienced death in the family, in spite of us experiencing loss, in spite of this deep heaviness of hopelessness, I'll go with you. Not because you have a plan or a vision, but because you'll be there. Because you'll be there. Why am I bringing all this up, right? Because when I think about my family, right? When I think about my family, there's not one moment. There was a moment in Josiah's birthing process in which they said that Josiah or Olga's womb didn't have enough liquid in her womb. And so it was causing undue stress on the baby. And if his heart rate was too high, they were going to have to induce her pretty early to get the baby out of there, because he wouldn't survive if he was under that much stress. And so hearing that, at a doctor's office is like, first, well, to be honest, Olga knew, and she kind of panicked. And I was listening, and I was like, I don't know anything that you're saying. So I just noticed that she was kind of panicky, and I was like, maybe something's wrong here, right? And then she starts to explain what's going on, and then I'm like, well, crap, like this isn't good at all. Like this is the worst news that you could kind of receive. And so they set up appointments to do stress tests and that kind of thing. And we had to go in for extra special visits. And she would sit there on a chair with this strap around her, and we would just cry. Because it's stressful. It was a stress test on us, right? It was measuring his heart rate. But there was a moment, I think it was in the second time that we did it, where they couldn't find it, right? They couldn't figure out what was going on. And I was like, dude, what is happening? What is happening? Because we're like 33 weeks or whatever. You're like getting to the end of the game, and they can't figure out what's going on. He's not moving in there. What's happening? Turns out he was asleep, right? Or something. That's something ridiculous. I'm like, dude, you've had hiccups for 20 weeks now. Figure it out, dude. Come on, you're stressing us out. But there was a moment in there where you realize, I've never seen this kid, never met this kid, don't know anything about his character, I don't know anything. But I know he's mine. And I'll do anything for that kid. And so you're just begging God, like, can we figure this out? What can I do to make sure that this kid is okay? What can I do to make sure that this kid makes it into this world? Because I want to see him. I want to be around him. I want to feel him. I want him to cry at night. I want to be woken up. I want him to drive me mad. I want to be tired. I want to change poopy diapers. I want to do it all. I just want him. This deep-seated fear of missing out on something beautiful. Then I think about him now, right? And I'm like, I look towards his future and like have all these things planned out. And Olga says, don't do that because he needs to be his own guy. But I'm going to make him great, right? And so I have all these hopes for him, right? I just want him to be him. I want him to be awesome because he is awesome. I want everyone to know he's awesome. I want him to explore every single thought. I told Olga this. I'm like, we need to start saving money now because if he wants to build a rocket, we're building one. If he wants to like build a house, it's going to be a magnificent house. Like, I'll do anything for this kid. I want him to grow up knowing that there's nothing that he can't do. That he's able to accomplish anything that he wants, that his brain is so much bigger than anyone could ever give him credit, that he's so much stronger than he ever thought that he could be. And he's just one, but I just want him to know. And even if he's taken everything from him, or he's not able to walk one day, or he's not able to talk one day, or he's not as smart as someone else, it doesn't change anything about the way that I see him. Because I have so much hope for that kid. I named him Josiah. He's the last good king. When I think about that, and I say, I would do anything to steal his pain, and I'd do anything to make sure he has a hope and a future. I'd give him any good gift. I'm reminded of our Father, who says, I want to take every pain. So much so that I go further than you would. If you think you're a good father, you pale in comparison to me. You think you'd go to any depth to steal his pain? I would go further to steal yours. You think you want a hope and a future for your kid? Have you heard my story? You're not able to provide anything compared to what I can provide that kid. There's no dream that you can have for him that's bigger than my dream for him. There's no goals bigger for him than your goals for him. You don't even see him as beautiful as I see him. Because you didn't get to even see him made for 9 months. I made him before I put him in Olga's womb. That's our God. Who steals every pain, who builds for us a hope and a future, and invites us into this story that started before the creation of all things and will last after the end of days. And he's inviting us into this story where he says, I want to take your pain and give you a hope and a future that's with me. He looks into our hopelessness, to our darkness, and he says, I'll come and be with you. Not because I'm a glutton for punishment or I enjoy the company of miserable people, but because I love you and you're there. So let me draw you out. Ruth is a character type of Jesus, and we are Naomi. We are bitter. We are broken. We're lost, seeing death surrounding us. And Jesus says, let me be with you. And the truth is, many of us, even today, say, Jesus, I don't want you in my bitterness. I'd rather suffer alone. I'd rather figure this out. I'd rather pull myself up by the bootstraps. I'd rather work my way out of it. And Jesus, I don't think I'm worthy to be around you anyways. I have such a low view of myself. I have such a low view of my circumstances that I don't really believe Jesus could enter into them. But Jesus says, don't turn me away. Let me be with you. Let me be with you. Ruth goes on. I was supposed to read the whole book with you guys, but not going to do that. Ruth goes on to go to extraordinary measures to take care of her mother-in-law, doing very difficult, painstaking tasks. And it's a beautiful story of self-giving and sacrifice to provide security to the one whom she loves. And so, what I want you to take home today is that what most families are really taking part in, once upon a time, most of us lived in tribes, right? If you went through like American history at all, you had like Native American tribes, right? I love reading stories about their relations within those tribes, because there was no isolation like we have today, where isolation is the fastest growing epidemic in the world. Loneliness, isolation. Well, in these tribe type situations, you didn't have that, right? People very much lived with each other. What they brought in, what they produced, was shared within the community of people. And the decisions that were made, including things like marriages, often were made with the community in mind. It wasn't based off your personal feelings or your personal desires or goals. It was what the community needed, where the community was going. So we're setting up arranged marriages. No, I'm just saying. I'm kidding. The community in mind. It was the focus. It was the drawing point. It was the most important point of life. Your family still desires that security, that trust, where this tight-knit group of people is the most important thing. Because what psychologists will say is, for kids who are going through puberty, through middle school and high school, they only want one thing. They don't know it deep down, they just want to belong. Because belonging is security. You're not on the outskirts. You're not on the fringe. Because if you're on the fringe, what happens in a tribe? You die, right? You go hungry. You get lost. You no longer are part of the tribe. You're removed. You're excluded. You don't get to eat. So you have to belong. You have to accept what the community is saying so that you belong. And so when you go through middle school and high school, it's a really difficult process when the school's telling you a bunch of things that are not godly and not true. And they say you have to believe these things if you want to be a part of this community. And so they say, okay, I guess I'll belong. Because they find security in something that is fundamentally insecure, which is our educational system and our worldly system that's out there. Where else will they find security? Well, for one, we need to make sure our homes are secure. Making sure that our homes are places in which conversations can actually happen. Where conversations are able to flow, where between the parents and kids there are no closed doors. Not literally like you can close a door, right? Like you can have doors, like I'm not encouraging you to use the restroom without a door closed or something. Like I'm not talking about that type of closed door, but like you can't have a closed door in your home where there's questions off limits. Where there's conversations off limits. There's nothing that can separate you from you and your family. There has to be this sense of trust and security, or they're going to go and find it somewhere else. That happens within marriages, that happens within parents, kids, with grandparents and grandkids. Your home needs to be a sanctuary, a safe place where any conversation is on the table. And you need to set the time aside to be present in those conversations, to welcome them, to not say, I'm too busy for you today, because that decision right there may be the end of your marriage. The end of the relationship between you and your kids. You might stay together, right? You might keep the rings, but the trust has been broken because you were too busy. Because you won't talk about it. Because you won't go to those places together. It needs to happen. The security needs to happen within the home. Within your family, right? This is beyond just, Olga and I and Josiah, because Josiah's conversations are not to an intellectual level in which we really understand each other, right? What about the relationship that he has with my parents and her parents? These type of relationships have to grow with each other, and there's a sense of security. A tribe. This is Josiah's tribe. This is your tribe. But then there's a broader community that you bring your home into. And that's this community. This is the community that is security. That's why we're inviting other homes that if you talk to them, some of the homes that have already come and been with us are broken homes, lost homes, hopeless homes, so that they can experience security. That the kids can look at you and say, I could talk to them about anything, and I know that they'd love me, that they'd walk into hopelessness with me because I'm there, and they want to be there with me. This people needs to be a people that commits to one another on such a level that you look at the brokenness of your neighbor and you say, I love them so much that even though I don't approve of the things that they're involved in or the things that they're going through, I'll walk into the darkness with them. Why? Because they're there. They are in the darkness. And I want to be there with them. That's what Jesus does for us. That's what we ought to do for one another. Sound good? Pray with me. Lord, I thank you so much for this church family. That we are a tribe. We're going to have to come up with a tribe name. Get some tribal banners around here or something like that. Lord, I just ask that your presence fall in this place. That we come in this place and we experience a communion of a message together, a communion of songs with one another. But Lord, you know that often the depth of our relationship goes no further than sitting in the same colored pews. Lord, may this be a change, even this morning. Lord, you know that I know that your heart was so enlightened by the conversations that happened on Friday night between people who are in the midst of the congregation, who rarely get to have conversations with one another, and there they were, talking to one another. No more than that. Just talking. But those conversations are light in the darkness. Community where there was none before. Security, trust. That these are our friends. That these are people, even though they aren't people who look like me or like the same things as me all the time or definitely have different food tastes, or Lord, we're different in so many ways, but we're rooted together in this one thing that is so true. That we love one another because you first loved us. And that if my neighbor, my brother, my sister is in the darkness, I want to be the light to them. I want you to be the light to them. So Lord, I just ask that in this space this morning, that we all might have an open heart to receiving you and the security that comes from being in a relationship with you, recognizing the gift of your Son, but also we might be open to speaking with one another, to connecting with one another, to love one another. I pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. If we could have the closing song, that'd be great.